Welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Today, I'll be talking with Francine Witte. She's the author of 11 books and chapbooks of flash fiction and poetry. But we're not going to be talking about the difference between flash fiction and poetry, so get that out of your head right now. Her newest flash fiction collection, Radio Water, is out now from Roadside Press. She's also the flash fiction editor for both Flash Boulevard and the South Florida Poetry Journal, also known as SoFlo Pojo. She lives in New York City, but you can also find her online at francinewitte.com. So sit back, relax, get ready to fall in love.
Okay, hello. I'm going to read 3 stories from my new book, which is Radio Water. Water from Roadside Press. The first story is When He Left. When he left, it was summer. It was soft exhale of sky and cloud float. It was a lemonade glass you rolled on your throat and humid drops of where did he go? Where did he go? It was you should not have stayed in the sun so long. You know how easy you burn. It was walk on the beach, the sudden screech of gulls like thoughts hanging in the air. It was when he told you he wasn't sure and you told him it's okay. I'll give you time. But time wasn't yours to give. It was strange perfume scent and no way not to smell it. It was telling yourself he fell in a patch of wildflowers. Meanwhile, your hair was feathered, your skin drying down to wilt. You, the part of the peach left over after the succulent flesh is bitten and stripped. The sky, a collection of hearts in orange and spill of leftover love. When he left, it was autumn. It was crunch and pumpkin and all the tricks your heart always makes. I scoop and goo, and that's what makes the face. And you know it's only pumpkins that work that way because there were no smiles on his face anymore. He wasn't lit from within anymore. And you could feel the breeze each time he walked in the room. You tried to remind him of apple picking and cinnamon and the sweet stickiness of toffee. You were trying to think of what could hold him, what could keep him, and you knew there was nothing but winter coming up soon. When he left, it was winter. It was raw claw of icy branch where the sun didn't look anymore. It was, oh, you should have worn a hat, which was another way to say you shouldn't have introduced him to your sister, best friend, coworker. You know how that is just another hole in the ice, another slip and skid, and there you are. Your car spinning like the hands of time, which don't stop, don't stop. And you were cleaning the snow slop off the hallway floor, the wood all buckled and warped, and rather than go after him one more goddamn time, you got on your knees, which are buckled now and warped themselves, what with time taking all it can, stuffing it into a sack, and there you are rubbing circles on the floor that will never feel his footsteps again, your back that will never feel his strum. When he left, there was no spring. The second story, Anywhere by the Sea. Grab of water fingers under your toes and horizon sailboats. This could be anywhere, but it's not. It's not your ice cream ocean from when you were 9 and your mother held a towel around you as you wriggled into drier clothes. Not the goodbye sand when Bobby Epstein kissed you one last twilight time, his face lit up by the bonfire collapsing, snapping, and Julie Mitchell's face lit up sudden behind him. Now the sea creeps deeper up around your ankles, washy and warm for April. light seeping out of the 5 o'clock sky, all of it going older, and you can't make it stop. This could be anywhere, but it isn't. You think how every shore everywhere has to look the same. Combination of boats and sand and half-built castles. Maybe an ice cream stick here and there. Up above the sky, the same combination of blue and whisper of waiting moon, and you, with the tide reaching high as your knees, collection of cells and eyelashes and memories. Same as everywhere, anywhere, standing there, feeling the slightest bit of undertow, and knowing how easy the tide could pull you in if you let it. And the last story I'm going to read is the title story from Radio Water. So, Radio Water. Every morning that June, we would watch Ralphie dip into the lake behind our summer house. Ralphie came from nuclear country and told us the lake was radioactive. Radio water, he called it. He never told us much about where he came from, so we didn't know if it was a bomb or what. He would just point to the hairless patch above his right ear. He did say that whatever happened left him mostly immune to further radiation, and that's why he could swim untouched in the lake. My little brother told us he didn't believe Ralphie, said he saw him through the window one day with a razor and shaving cream. Father had told us that this would be our final summer at the lake. He said he would be leaving us for good to live with the other family he made when my mother wasn't watching him every goddamn minute, which is later how my mother would describe it. My parents didn't speak to each other anymore. She wouldn't even look in his direction, not when he burned hamburgers on the grill or when he zoomed his car away each night after supper. One morning, late in July, we were watching Ralphie, like always, how he would dip his toe in, then up to his waist, finally knifing himself through the water to the other side where the rowboats knocked and swayed. Ralphie explained that the rowboats were also immune, and that's why the water hadn't eaten them. One other morning, my father showed us photos of his other family, all of us looking, except, of course, for my mother. Same number of kids in his other family, 2 boys, 2 girls. They were younger than us, newer. They were swimming in a lake. They were eating perfect hamburgers. Later, we went outside to see Ralphie coming out of the radio water and wrapping himself in a Spider-Man towel. He looked at us watching him and held up his right hand, 2 fingers only. Guess I'm not completely immune, he called over, beads of radio water on his face, and my little brother telling us that Ralphie was folding his other fingers back. Ralphie palmed the water off his face and walked over to my little brother. Listen, Pipsqueak, he said, his chest glistening in the sunlight, glowing almost Uranian. I'd throw you in, but the water would fizz you up alive. The next time my father showed us his new family, my little brother wandered outside, slapped the screen door closed behind him, and walked over to the water's edge. He just stood there looking at the spot where the boats sway. I walked outside one night after supper. My father was sitting by the hammock that was always filled with mosquitoes after the rain. But this time, by this time every other night, my father had driven off to his other family. But not that night. That night he was sitting very still, hands in his lap, and looking down at the ground. We all went to bed, and it wasn't till later when something woke me. I looked out the window to see my father loading up the car with all his suitcases, along with a bundle of some kind, the exact shape of my little brother. Ralphie told everyone the next day that my little brother must have wandered into the radio water and just fizzed away. Like my fingers, he said, holding up his hand, like my hair. I thought back to my little brother doubting everything Ralphie said. I thought back to last night watching my brother disappearing into my father's other family. Now that my mother didn't have my father to ignore, she became chatty and younger somehow. We never talked about my little brother anymore. Ralphie's story seemed to be enough for her. It's like my brother fizzing away in the radio water was an easier thing to believe. End of August, and my mother told us we would be coming back next summer. She had fallen in love with the nearby hiking trails and woke us up at 6 a.m. each morning for a run. She ignored the men who came to examine the lake, who told her the water was safe to swim in, ignored Ralphie even when his hair grew in and she could see his fingers plain as day, ignored the photo my father sent with my little brother seated on his knee and smiling as if for the first time in his life. My mother waved it away and said, "That's a boy who looks like your brother. It doesn't make him your brother." When she said it, she looked off across the lake at the boats still swaying and knocking, the boats that maybe even only looked like boats. Thank you very much.
Wow, Francine, I feel like I am still stuck in that summer in that last story there. Um, that was that was so engaging and full of nostalgia, but also a different kind of sadness than you typically get with nostalgia. I mean, all nostalgia has a little twinge of it, but there's another layer for that. I loved that. Um,
You.
I also love the way I know that you also are a poet. You write flash, but you also write poetry. And especially in that first story, I noticed so much repetition, like don't stop, don't stop. What could hold him? What could keep him? I feel like the poetry stuff really comes through in just a phenomenal way in that.
Thank you.
Um, so speaking of phenomenal things, what is a book that has caused the most mayhem in your life?
I think it was The Stranger by Albert Camus, um, for several reasons. When I was first introduced to it, it was by my English teacher, Walter Robachek. I went to high school in Queens, New York, live in New York City. And so up until then, books seemed kind of, ordinary. But, Mr. Robachek, I remember telling us about existentialism, which, to a teenager, like that's just heaven, all that angsty kind of like, no, nothing is real. It's just like everything just exists. It just is. Nothing has meaning, it's except like, you know what I mean? Like we put meaning onto everything, but a thing just is a thing. Like my mother died. It's not, we make it sad because we make it sad. But it is just a fact. And that whole concept is like, wow. I mean, that isolation of just a thing being a thing. And that just like even more so than the book, that the idea of existentialism. But I also love the book. More so, if you, I would say if you haven't read The Stranger, just go read it. It's just so great. Um, and also when I was teaching high school, I taught it, and I think I was so excited about it, and that became very infectious. So the kids loved it too. So, but I would say that one just because of the message of existentialism, and also I just found it a very interesting voice that the narrator Merceau has. It was very flat almost, and I do like that in writing. I like very, you know ornate and flowery writing, but I also admire very flat writing that evokes, you know, um,
Yeah. Um, so the students responded well to it then.
oh, they loved it because I loved it. You know, when you love something, you can't help but communicate that enthusiasm. You just, you know, like, oh, like I would be like, oh, wait till you read this chapter.
Wait till you get to the brine in her hair. You're gonna love it, kids.
Right. So when you're like that as a teacher, you know, and the teachers that I've had that did that, I had a teacher in college, my Shakespeare professor, and he was so excited. He would jump up and down when he was talking about, you know, and Henry the Fourth, you know, Henry Bolingbroke was like a modern day, you know, Harvard guy, and like it just he made it come to life so much. So I think that that's if you're, you know, if you have a teacher who does that or they get excited about something, you get excited about it.
Yeah, definitely. How long did you teach?
20 years. Yeah, I taught in the New York City public school system for 20 years, and you know, I had a lot of really wonderful students I still keep in touch with. And you know, they're all grown up now and have kids and all sorts of things. And it's very, you know, it's nice. It's very nice. So you know, it's a challenge too. Like because you know, just the way it's set up, you know, um, and you keep getting moved around a lot in the school system. Like you might be in one school and then another school the next year. Just things just happen. So
Wow, I didn't think, and with New York Public Schools, that's a huge system. So
oh yeah, and you know, it's not like I like to watch teen dramas. I just like that's just one of my things. And whenever you see TV school, you know, like even like the kids who like act out, they're still acting, asking questions. You know, they're not taking the pass to the bathroom and disappearing for the whole period.
right.
You know, they're like saying, but I don't I don't agree with that. And I think like that would be a dream for me to have that. And I would have classes like that sometimes where everybody was engaged, even if they were challenging, you know, the idea. And, you know, some books really bring that out more than others, like, you know, Catcher in the Rye or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You know, they just, kids really respond to those. Not always in a good way, you know, so.
Wow. Um, my brain right now is trying to imagine if we had read like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in high school, and I don't
Mhm.
think that that's something that they ever would have. We read a lot of Steinbeck and stuff like that,
Right, right.
um, which I love. Um,
Mhm.
but I feel like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest might get get to students in a very different way. Wow.
Well, you know, one thing about also about another, that's another book that I highly recommend you read, even if you've seen the movie, because it's so different. I had first seen the play, Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was very different from the movie, and very different from the book. And the book is so, like, as a writer, I mean, it's just each paragraph is so densely packed. It's so beautifully written, you know, just even from that point of view. So much happens in just one paragraph. It's just hard to believe. So just even stylistically, I think it's an important book to to read. Like, you know, sometimes I approach a lot of reading in general as do I like the voice here? Do I like the style? A lot of times more than the story itself. You know, if you have a good writing style, um, that that's like I get sold on that pretty easily. more so than if you send me an interesting story. I'm the editor for South Florida Poetry Journal and for Flash Boulevard, and that is one thing that's my first thing that I look for is like, can this person is this writing? And I don't mean that to be flippant, but just putting words down on a page isn't necessarily writing. It's like it's got to have style, it's got to have like technique, it's got to do something. And so the books that I'm always attracted to do something that stylistically is interesting or engaging or original, or just how many stories are there? Come right down to it, you know?
Yeah, um I've heard that said many times. Um there's lots of common stories. Even when you look at Shakespeare, he was kind of plucking from
Oh,
some other
definitely.
stuff to make what he
Absolutely. And we pluck from Shakespeare,
right.
like it just happens all the time. And it's like there's so many variations on a thing. There's so many basic plots, but it's what you do with it. You can tell the same story, but in just a different way.
Yeah, definitely. That's um and as long as your writing style is something that can still pull people in, it's gonna work. What's your speaking of stories that get told over and over, you mentioned that you like teen dramas and things.
I do.
And those I think folks often sort of level the complaint against them that they can be sort of repetitive and similar, all the same.
Yes.
What's what's your favorite teen drama and what makes it stand out for you?
Well, I love this question. I spent a lot of time this past summer watching the OC,
Okay.
which I had never seen before. I had watched, in the 90s, I watched 90210 and, 90210, I'm thinking the other one, Melrose Place, which was like it, but that wasn't a teen drama. But I watched the OC and I started watching the OC because I had been hooked on Laguna Beach and the hills. I just like that. So, um, and the thing I liked about it was you can be young and gorgeous and rich, and you're still going to have problems. Your boyfriend is still going to cheat on you. Your father is still going to lose the house. I mean, so, um, and I started watching the OC because I was like looking around. Maybe it was Hulu or something one night for something to watch, and I said, "Oh, the OC! Oh, the OC is like that's where the hills took place, or Laguna Beach, Orange County. Okay, let me try it." And I just loved it because I thought, well, I like the characters a lot, and I just thought again, it was like, oh, they have like the same problems that everybody has, and I just liked it, but it was very repetitive. They would keep having, you could see like by maybe later in the first season, even it's like, oh, they're just doing another story that was just like that story, or oh, they're breaking up again, or they're getting back together again. But I still liked it. Again, it was not so much the story, but I liked the way it was being told. I liked the characters. So it was a different variation on what I'm talking about with style. It's like you got me as long as I'm engaged with your style and who you are. So
Oh, yeah. Are there any are there any teen dramas that are sort of current ones that have just started that you're loving?
I haven't really. Well, I went on to watch Gossip Girl, of course, because that was the same producer, and then there was a new version of Gossip Girl which I watched. Um, but I haven't been watching anything lately. I tend to watch also a lot of dating shows. Find
Yeah.
those endlessly fascinating. Love is Blind. I just I just love it. It's so ridiculous, but I do love it. So,
Did you watch the one? I can't remember the actual, oh, I think it was called Sexy Beast, maybe. It was the one where they like people were in costume. They had a makeup team that would like
ooh,
do
that
people up
sounds
so you couldn't
good.
see who they were at all, and it would be like a tiger and a
Yeah.
koala were going out and they wouldn't actually know what the
Ooh,
person really looked like.
I like that. I'm gonna
Oh,
check that out. Thank you.
yeah. That was that was the one that I watched
Yeah.
most recently.
I like that. Yeah, there's a lot of variations on the dating show, with all the streaming networks. There's just so much of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Um and that so where my brain has gone from that is thinking about oftentimes when I'm watching dating shows and teen dramas and things like that, you just want to sort of yell at the screen and say like, don't do that, like do this, don't do that, and as you're watching
Oh,
people do things. um and it makes me wonder, what kind of advice would you give to a younger version of yourself? What would you yell at the screen of your life, or at the if you're watching other folks' lives, what advice?
oh, the like, just don't take this all too seriously. Like, and I've said that to actual students in high school. It's like, this isn't like, don't pay attention to this. This is just high school. I've said that there are a few students that really needed to hear that. I would have needed to hear that.
I, I would have
That this is just high school. This is really not like, not that it's not your life and it's not important, but you know, our younger versions of ourselves think this is it. This is it. Um, you sort of get locked in that idea that this is the moment, this is how it's always going to be. And even when things are good, it's good to remember that too. It's takes work to stay there and takes luck to stay there. If you're doing something great at that moment, you just appreciate it, be grateful. But I do remember saying that to students like that were having kind of a hard time, like, just wait. You'll look back on this in a few years, and it you'll see that this was just high school, and it was just, oh, you're worried about things that really, you're not going to remember. You're just not going to remember this in a few years, and you'll be a grown up, and you'll be able to take more charge of things. And I would tell myself that for sure. I would tell myself that about 10 years ago. Sometimes about yesterday. Like,
I
just check yourself.
Yeah, I feel like that is excellent advice. Um I was a little high strung in high school, I'm not gonna lie. And I think that would have been excellent to hear.
I think writers in general probably share that because we tend to be a lot in our heads, more so than
Yeah.
other, like, I think actors, people who end up being actors, they're very, I'm here. But I think writers tend to be sort of observers. Even if, you could be an extroverted person too, it's not that. But I think there's a lot of introspection and turning things over, and that later will translate to how you write.
Mm.
But I think, when you're in high school, you're doing it in your head, and, you're thinking and having dialogues and other stories, so.
Yeah. So, what advice do you think that a younger version of yourself would give to you now?
um yeah, don't take it for granted, like that, you know like, because I think the later you get in life, you start to forget that, not to get too dismal here, but there's only so much time that we have on earth, And I think that's something that, you don't really think about when you're young. You just don't. You think, I'm just gonna live forever. Um, not always, but often, more times than when you're older and you go, look, I realize mathematically there's just so much time left.
Mhm.
So I think a younger person could like look at an older person and say, just try to remember that you have, you know, the clock's ticking, which I know sounds really sad and everything, but it's also good sometimes to think of the clock is ticking. I think it wakes you up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Um, well, you have published a number of books. What else are you I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Because I don't want to say looking to accomplish, because that sounds, but like what's next on your radar of things that you want to do?
Uh, I mean, I'm always thinking of, I could do this, I could do that, but I think right now I feel like I want to just keep writing. I like to, go back and forth between flash fiction, which I love, and poetry, which I love. And I'm always thinking, oh, I could do, had a play done a few years ago that I had originally written as a spoken word piece. It's like four characters and it's written in rhyming verse. And I think I would like to maybe do like and it was done as a play, but it was originally intended as a four people sitting on the stage, like very, very cool with bongos and, stuff like that, lights going on and off. I might want to try something like try doing that again. I had done one or two versions of that before it got done as a play. It's called Love is a Bad Neighborhood.
Is um is there a recording out there anywhere that people can access?
No, it's never like that's something I would like to do. Just get, you know, a group together and do it on stage, have an audience, but do it the way I had intended originally, which is the four people. And, it's Sister Pain and Sister Joy and the Love Doctor. And then there's a guy who gets between Sister Joy and Sister Pain. And so it's kind of an allegory about love, but it's done in verse. And I was very influenced by and Saki Shange's for Colored Girls.
Mm.
I'd seen that. It's like that's a play that's done in monologues. And so I was very influenced by that. And so I wanted to do something like that. So I wrote it and I had a few readings of it. And it was fun. And I meant for it to be done like in a very in the moment kind of a thing, very cool. And if someone wants to sing part of the lyrics, they can, or if they just want, the bongos are playing, just very, very groovy, So I think I keep thinking about I want to do that. And I like to do, I like to do a lot of things on Zoom. Um, I host a couple of readings on Zoom and you know things like that. Just maybe work on more flash, more poetry. I still like to do poetry, even though I feel like flash has sort of taken over a little bit, but in my life. But I still like poetry.
Who's your favorite poet or a poet that you love?
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
tough question.
yeah, I've always liked William Stafford. I always thought he was very, very good. And there's just like so many people like around now. Like I wouldn't even want to say because I wouldn't want to leave anybody out. But um, Yeah, William Stafford, because I like the way he used very plain language, but it's very deceptively evocative. So I've always liked him.
Nice. Were you, I cannot remember what year it was, but there was I think it was when AWP was in Seattle, and a book came out of sort of people paying homage to William Stafford. Did you were you there? Did you go to any of the readings for that or?
I don't think I was there. I went to the one in Seattle this past year,
Oh, okay.
and I went to the one, I think I met you in person in Chicago, maybe
Yeah, I think so because
when cold June came in, and I the Southeast Review was, and
yeah,
I had won the contest, the poetry contest,
yeah,
and the reading. You had a reading at the Manhattan Club or something like that.
yeah,
This is all coming back now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It is, it's been really nice to see you again because I think we've had a lot of interactions since then, but
absolutely.
we haven't, I don't think we've actually
Yes,
gotten to talk, so that's been really,
yes.
really nice. Um, thank you. Thanks for coming and chatting with me today, Francine.
This has been so much fun. Really.
That was a really fun interview to do. Ah, I didn't work Eurovision in though. Oops. But we did talk about teen drama. That's good. We talked about some pop culture stuff, so got that taken care of. And I loved Francine's advice about not taking it all so seriously. Because I really do. If you look back at some of my older videos, um, I do a lot of chatter about trying to not take this so seriously. And so, what did I do to not take something seriously? I started an interview series. That's what you do when you're just chilling, right? Thanks for stopping by.